First item we have on the agenda is declarations of interest, please. Councillor Williams.
Can I declare an interest in item 16 as my wife is an employee and potential beneficiary from the Flexi Time scheme if introduced?
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Declaration of interest on item 21 as I'm the Chair of Transition Scilly. Can I, just get clarification from the monitoring officer whether I can vote on the other items in the community fund or not?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The situation is that all the applications, if all the applications are granted, then the funds will be overspent. Yeah, the situation, sorry about that, Chairman. The situation is that if all the applications are granted, then the fund will be overspent, so there needs to be a choice. In that case, the choice on the other ones will affect the ones which affect you.
The
so
advice
yes,
would be not to
withdraw.
Thank you. And also, item 22, just to note that as Chair of Transition Scilly, I do campaign on climate change. Just to note.
Thank you. And now move on to item 2, the minutes of our previous meeting. To confirm them as a correct record, Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. If members could turn to page 6, and if we look at the resolution on number 3, we agreed, following my suggestion, that the target go down to 95,000 as a trigger point. That is mentioned in the outset of number 3, and it needs to be reflected again the second time the target's mentioned. It goes back to 97 and it should be 95.
Thank you. Could I have someone to propose the adoption of the minutes, please? Councillor Smith.
So one small addition, just before the community fund applications, I left the meeting in the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marcus, seconder, Councillor Mumford. As amended. Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you. Right, I move on to item 3, Chairman's announcements. I just wanted to welcome Geraldine Davey. Thank you very much, Geraldine, for coming today, and Clive from the press. And I would also like to mention, as you will be aware, Councillor Molson has unfortunately had to stand down from council for personal reasons. And I very much regret that he's unable to continue as a councillor. And I'm sure you will join me in wishing to thank him very much for his considerable contribution to this council, both as a councillor and during his time as chairman. And I'd like that recorded, please. Thank you. Questions under Standing Order 14, which is item 4 on the agenda. We have a question from Councillor Smith. Over to you, Councillor Smith.
Chairman, I'm afraid I'm struggling to find my own wording at the minute. Is it written in any of the agenda? I've had trouble with iPads and various things.
Councillor Smith's question was, what measures are the Council of the Isles of Scilly taking to prepare for Brexit? In light of the current extreme political uncertainty at Westminster, the chances of a no-deal Brexit are high. In the event of a disorderly exit from the European Union, what risks are the Council of the Isles of Scilly exposed to, and what mitigation measures can be taken? Furthermore, if this were to happen in a very short time frame, as is possible, would the Council be faced with any additional negative issues? There could also be wider threats to the islands, such as risks to essential food and energy supplies. What role could this Council play in mitigating such potential risks?
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. I'll hand over to our Chief Executive, who will respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. The Chairman's answer is, the Council of the Isles of Scilly is part of the Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly Local Resilience Forum, LRF. The LRF forms part of a national network of resilience forums that report to the Cabinet Office regarding the key risks to communities. The LRF coordinates multi-agency plans for and responds to major incidents and other risks to human life, the environment, infrastructure and the economy. A considerable amount of resource has been committed by the partner agencies through the LRF for preparing and planning for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union, particularly in the event of a no-deal scenario. The Council of the Isles of Scilly has participated in the regular LRF Brexit meetings to understand any potential impact to the region and consequently the potential impacts on the islands. This participation has included attending twice-weekly meetings. The frequency of meetings will increase this week, that was the 8th of April, as revised deadlines approach. In addition to increasing senior officer capacity, including relevant training, to the emergency planning team to ensure there is sufficient resources to allow attendance at the LRF Brexit planning meetings, the Council has engaged with the Cornwall Council emergency planning team to draw upon their expertise and experience. As part of their engagement, they facilitated a workshop with the Council's service managers and the senior management team to ensure that risks had been identified and mitigations planned where necessary. The Government has released sector-specific guidance and technical notes for business and the public to make sure that they are ready for Brexit. These can be found at, and then there's a email website address. We have worked with our partners in the LRF to understand the likely impact to the region, including the islands. For example, we have worked in partnership with South West Water, who also sit on the LRF as a utility, to understand the resilience on the islands regarding consumable water treatment, not just for council supplies, to ensure there is no risk of water supplies being compromised as a result of leaving the European Union. At present, there are no areas within the council's remit that have required specific intervention, but this is being constantly reviewed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, by way of clarity, understanding order 14.9, if after a reply is given to a written question, the person who asked the question considers that the reply requires clarification, he may ask once for clarification, but no further debate will ensue in the chamber on the matter at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't require any clarification. Thank you for it, and good luck, everyone.
Thank you. We move on to item 5 on the agenda, to consider reports from committees. We have none. Item 6 on the agenda, to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. We have none. Item 7 on the agenda, members' updates, page 9, and there's also a report in the supplementary pack. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to focus my update this morning on the town hall element of my report, although I'm happy to take comments or questions on any other part of it. But before, I just wanted to mention that we were presented with a plaque from the Mayor of Rotherham last Tuesday evening, I think it was. There was a workshop focusing on SEN, special educational needs, supporting children and families, which a large number of the proportion of our population attended. The plaque was presented and we sent a piece of artwork from Oriel Hicks back in return. But I'll give a more comprehensive update on that next month. As I said, the town hall has been almost at a state of stalemate for a while, with Theatre Club and the council and various other partners struggling to make any progress moving forward. Councillor Mumford and myself have been part of several meetings to try and unpick some of the issues and some of the challenges. And I think we've now got a bit more clarity on what each side needs to do. I think there is goodwill to move things forward. There was a bit of confusion, a bit of misunderstanding, but I hope some of that is now being reduced. My notes set out some of the challenges we face in terms of electrics, the actual space itself, the stage, fire regulations and things like that, but also safeguarding when we've got children and adults all using the same space presents quite a few challenges, and that's going to take much more work to overcome. So I'd like to work towards Theatre Club being able to use the town hall, at least for adult performances, within the next 12 months or so. Performances like the pantomime are going to probably be much more challenging to overcome with the changing rooms and those sorts of spaces which we need to have. One of the concerns that we, Councillor Mumford and myself, have heard on various different occasions is to do with the council sort of backing the whole scheme, trying to give some assurances to Theatre Club that any money that they spend will be money well spent in the medium to long term. So I would like us as a local authority to look at the town hall use on its merits, to consider the sort of wider social, economic merits that drama and the use of the space have, and to move forward so that we can look at all different options for the town hall, some which might be more affordable than others, and as a council to give some support to Theatre Club and other groups, but we're very committed to working with them to come up with solutions to get the stage back in use and to get the Theatre Club back in the town hall for performances that they want to deliver, probably over the next year. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Avril?
Well, not really. I think you've said it all, but I think we would like to have members backing to ask somebody to take up on the use of the town hall, see what options we have, what's affordable. I don't know who would do that report. Would it be Mr. Pierce?
Well, we'll look into that, Councillor Mumford. Yeah. Yeah.
They'd like to see some sort of movement, and we have promised we'll do our best. I just wondered if all members would back this.
Yes, Chief Executive, please.
Could I just ask it, for the purpose of the minutes, I'm unclear what's being backed. To do a piece of work that would explore options for the future of the building, explore costs, etc., would be a considerable piece of work at considerable cost. So I think what I'd suggest is that the officers go away and have a think about how we might find the capacity to even explore the issue.
I think that would be very helpful. I think at this meeting, if we could just have some sort of verbal assurances by members that they are willing to take that route, and then to do something a bit more formal, bringing a paper back to council at some stage later this year to set out different options for overcoming the challenges we face.
What I suggest, Chairman, if it helps, is that perhaps members could note the report and that officers will consider presenting a further report to a future meeting.
I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking Councillor Williams and Councillor Mumford for their efforts on this, and I'm sure we will be backing you. Thank you. Anything further on any members' updates, please? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to Councillor Williams and to endorse absolutely this work around the town hall and great work. Thank you. It's a massively underused asset, I think, for the council. Just a question on the dog fouling. Again, good to see this has been taken forward. A very simple question. The senior EHO will report further to members on this matter. Do we have a timescale on that?
He's quite... sorry.
Just in terms of resource there, the dog warden appointment has been shortlisted, and we hope to do interviews next week. So at least we'll have someone in place to start taking this work forward.
When I spoke with the senior EHO, he was quite keen to liaise with Health and Wellbeing Board, recognising the sort of health and wellbeing risks associated with dog mess in the community. So Health and Wellbeing Board is potentially in June. He would like to potentially bring some more information to that prior to it coming to full council at a further point.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, well, if there are no further questions to Councillor Williams, I was just going to present the AONB update.
Yeah.
So take it as written. I just wanted to add regarding the balloon releases that we've had some movement on that in consultation with Tresco Estate, and I've just confirmed with Councillor Dorian Smith this morning that Tresco Estate have always had effectively a ban against release of balloons and sky lanterns. So we're getting close to all of Scilly being covered by this policy, and the Duchy are looking favourably upon it, but haven't yet released a policy. So just wanted to clarify that. Happy to take any questions on the update.
Thank you. Okay, before I move on, I'd just like to welcome Councillor Rogers this morning. Roger, I just wanted to check that that you didn't have any declarations of interest. Oh, thank you. Right, we'll move on, please, to urgent items, which I have none. That was agenda item 8. So agenda item 9, I'll hand over to Lisa, Planning Officer. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. This is a planning application for the construction of a dwelling in place of an existing implement shed at Holy Vale. The existing buildings will be demolished and a 3-bedroom detached dwelling is proposed with an integral garage workshop within the ground floor. The site at Holyvale is considered previously developed land, well related to an existing group of dwellings, and as such, residential redevelopment is considered to be acceptable. The applicants have indicated that they accept the need for a Section 106 legal agreement to restrict the occupation of the property. They've also sought to address the issue of bats. The existing buildings, whilst of a lower utilitarian scale, are not considered to be of historic value that could be used to withhold permission. The existing site does not contain any listed buildings or the designated heritage assets. Whilst the resulting development will be more prominent within the immediate vicinity, on the basis of the design of the dwelling, being in keeping with the site, not having significant adverse impacts upon the wider landscape or neighbouring amenity, and the occupation of the dwelling being restricted, officers are supportive of the scheme and recommend it for approval. Due to an outstanding issue of having a bat emergence survey scheduled for May, members are asked to endorse the approval but delegate the decision to senior manager pending the submission of the outstanding bat survey and the signing of the Section 106 legal agreement. I'm just going to run you through the slides. So this is the site at Holyvale. This is the proposed dwelling from the front, west elevation, and as you come down the hill into Holyvale, this is the north elevation of the dwelling. It's on a slope, so part of that will be obscured by the slope of the hill. Then from the south, as you go back up the hill, you'll see the more prominent elevation with the agricultural building to the rear. And then again, an elevation you would never see, which is the back of the property. These are the ground floor, which you can see the garage workshop and the first floor. So this is the kind of Nissan hut, and with the agricultural building behind, which will be retained. So that building to be demolished. This is it from the north side as you come down the hill, and from the south. And these are the views. This is lower down, South Tinks, Middle Tinks, and North Tinks. It will be the next one up from these 3 existing properties. Then you've got the Holyvale farmhouse opposite, and the row of cottages that run at the back of Holyvale farmhouse. And then you've got the agricultural glass houses to the north of Holyvale farmhouse, which is opposite the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you finished, Lisa? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Marcus, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm glad this application has finally come to council. It's been a while in the works. I just want to thank the applicants for their patience, and it's been good and their understanding on the process. We've had a couple of issues with the process, which hopefully will have been ironed out, which we've learned from in terms of customer service, basically, which we've taken note of and passed feedback to Exmoor on. The actual plan itself, I think, is fine. Obviously, from looking at the photos and seeing the site, it's going to be an improvement on the actual site as well. I want to ask a question about paragraph 39, when the report talked about house sizes, and it mentions the emerging local plan, policy LC6. What's the impact, and this is a general, not necessarily about this application, but what's going to be the general impact of larger scale the local plan on these larger scale builds?
Sorry, I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
We're going through a process at the moment of drawing up a validation checklist, which will require applicants to, as part of their planning submission, for new dwellings, for extensions to dwellings and replacement dwellings, allows them to calculate the existing usable floor space and what the resulting usable floor space will be with any extension or with any replacement dwelling. We will then use the intention is to use the national standards as a benchmark to guide as to whether or not something is considered to be excessively large or excessively small. We don't want to set maximum standards because the government standards are minimums. We don't want to use the minimum standards as the maximums, but the way we've been using them over the last 12 months is to gauge how big properties are becoming after either being replaced or being extended, so we can get a gauge as to whether or not it's creating a problem in terms of house prices generally. We're not saying that large properties aren't justifiable, because they absolutely are. And when you've got large families, there's an absolutely clear case to have a big property. It's trying to provoke applicants to consider the investment they're making and its long-term value, if particularly when properties are going to be occupancy restricted. There's a limited market, you know.
Yeah, it's not about long-term value, it's long-term value to the community as well, creating that churn, if you like, that resaleable properties. Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what Councillor Marcus says, and it's obviously been a long time coming. I'm aware they've gone through the mill somewhat with, certainly with BAT surveys. I just want to ask, really just to clarify on paragraph 56, page 26, regarding the outcomes of the BAT survey. So if in the, I'm looking at it from the applicant's point of view, the worst case scenario that BATs are found and therefore it has a big impact on the development, what happens then if the applicants want to challenge the report? Because we could then be looking at a situation where they're delayed by another year. If BATs are found and it halts development, and you then have to have another survey done May and September the following year, what would the situation be there if they then wanted a second opinion, or, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so if BATs are found, it wouldn't necessarily hold up the granting of planning permission, but they would likely have a condition that would require them to get their BAT licence before they carry out the work. So if BATs are found to be in the building, they wouldn't be allowed to handle the bats. They would have to have a European Protected Species licence to carry out the works. So that would be a requirement anyway. I mean, regardless of whether or not we had a condition to that effect, that would be the expectation for them as applicants if bats are found. So my expectation from the report is that there are either bats or there aren't, and they would have to put in some mitigation measures to accommodate the bats that are displaced by the demolished buildings in the scheme, which to me wouldn't be a big issue to encompass that in the plans. But I don't anticipate, unless Craig's got any other comments, holding up by another year if there are found to be bats in the building.
Okay, that's reassuring, thank you. And just a wording issue on condition 7, page 32. So this is around the sustainable design measures and rainwater harvesting. And I would propose that the sustainable design measures to be incorporated into the proposal should be agreed in writing with the local planning authority and must include water conservation and harvesting measures and renewable energy generation, because that was put in their design and access statement. And I think we need to ensure that these schemes go ahead with such measures.
That's a change that you can make.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I like the design. I think it's in keeping with the area. With all the conditions attached, I'm happy with that. As long as the 106 agreement is in place, I'm happy to oppose the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, with that amendment, I'm happy to second that.
Yeah, thank you. Could those show, please, all in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Just before we go on to the next application, item 10, I would like to welcome Councillor Sims and just ask if you have any declarations of interest.
Yes, I'm not sure what agenda item it is, but the community interest, sorry, the community fund, I have a couple of non-pecuniaries in that. With that, I'm going to go again.
Thank you. Right, we'll take item 10 now, please, on the agenda. Again, with you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a planning application to retain a self-contained unit of accommodation created in the roof space of this property. You will note from the report that the property at Trefusis was approved as a replacement dwelling in 2012. The current dwelling dates from then. The approved plans did show accommodation in the roof space at that time, but did not extend as across the whole of the upper floors of the building. It was just a part of it. Internal alterations subsequent to the permitted dwelling resulted in a larger amount of first floor accommodation. The applicants have subsequently converted the first floor to a self-catering, self-contained holiday let, and it is this first floor use of the property that the applicants are now seeking to regularise. Although large, the retention of the accommodation is considered to be acceptable, a short-term holiday let accommodation, subject to details to obscure and restrict the opening of the side-facing roof light. The application is recommended for approval. So this is the site. That was the original house at Trefusis, and that was the footprint. That was the replacement dwellings as it's been built. The ground floor, so the first floor and the ground floor, and that's as built. And that's just so you can give an indication, that was the original, roughly, the original dwelling. So the whole of the first floor is a holiday let, which they're now seeking to retain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. Again, a general question. If page 39, the original planning application, the window in question, which, paragraph 39, was in a different place on the original plans. How can members pass a application and an item get changed within that plan that enables this to happen, where members didn't pass that in the first place?
I think there was always a window, a roof light, roughly in that at some point in that side elevation. You can't see it from that photograph. It's on the back corner.
But that roof light wasn't in a place where it would enable habitable space upstairs.
No, it wasn't. They've subsequently put a floor in.
Yep.
And so that roof light then, instead of just providing light, provides a view to the neighbouring property.
So how did that occur?
They just decided to build it that way. I don't know. I mean, they've obviously gone through building regulations, and the plans that have been approved through building control have been different to those we've approved through planning. But there has historically not been any kind of cross-checking, which is something we are going to address moving forward, in that building control now send us their lists of applications they've got for building control so we can check, but we also send them lists of planning decisions that have been made so they can check discrepancies like that.
Yeah, I would like to just make sure that link is pretty tight, because as a member, if we pass something, then I would expect what we passed to be what was actually built, not adjusted.
Chairman, just to point out that both building regulations and planning applications and planning permissions are actually separate regulations. Now, what has happened, and it's a quirk really, I think, sometimes with the regulations, that we approve something in terms of its design, but because of the building regulations, it means that certain aspects of the design have to be amended. So at the moment, for any local planning authority in the country, it's actually quite difficult sometimes to actually get that consistency. And the reasons why both are joined up in the fact that the planning permission obviously isn't always guaranteed with building regulations, is because once you've got planning permission, you do need building regs. So it's a bit of a quirk. What we are trying to do, though, is address that with Cornwall Council, who of course now got delegated responsibility for building regs, to ensure that they can check both planning application plans and also building control plans to ensure that they are joined up. And when they're not, then obviously we will seek then a material change, which obviously comes through the planning process.
Yeah, I just hope it's easier to get stuff agreed before it's built, rather than and cheaper for both the applicant get it agreed afterwards. So.
Chairman, it's not always difficult to do that because building regulations is very specific. So what it would actually mean is, and this is something actually that the government have looked at, particularly at householders, whether or not co-joining building regulations and planning. But at the moment, both acts actually sit outside of each other. So it's actually quite difficult sometimes to actually join them up, if that makes sense. So we as planners might insist on a certain window size or a window design, but actually in building regulations, it might not be appropriate.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Well, yeah.
But what we will try to do, though, is best we can align to ensure that any material changes resulting from building regs actually work their way back to the planning process.
It just feels like this applicant has played the game and has come out on top, and there's not a lot we can do about it because there's nothing really where we can refuse this application. So I would reluctantly pass it, given there's not much that we can do.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I totally endorse everything Councillor Marcus has said. Our hands are tied. Here we are again. Recommendation is that members approve. Here our hands are tied. So I will propose the recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Right, we're now coming to item 11 on the agenda, the audit plan, which you'll find in your supplementary pack. And I'd like to hand over to Geraldine Davey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So there's 3 items I'm going to present today. The first one is the audit plan. So apologies that you're supposed to go from one set of papers to another. So the audit plan is your audit plan for 1819. It's a standard item that external audit do have to produce and share with you as members to get your approval and acknowledgement of the plan and the contents of the plan. And this will inform our work on our risk assessment when we receive your financial statements come the end of May this year. So can I ask you to turn to page 3 of the audit plan, please? It's headlined Introduction and Headlines. So in terms of the areas that we want to focus on, under significant risks paragraph, you will see that we want to continue to look at your revenue cycle, in particular the grants that you receive and how these are accounted for. So members may recall over the last 2-3 years, we have found errors in terms of how they're accounted for in your processes. Some of them has meant delay in issuing the audit opinion. So heavily focused in terms of grants and how they're accounted for and the processes that you have in place for those. We're also going to look at how you process journals and then concentrate on some of the large figures in your accounts, which are your PPE or the valuation of your assets in particular and the valuation of your net pension fund liability. So actually, in terms of the comparison to the plans that I've presented over the last couple of years, there are no differences here. There is still that focus, and we're not moving away from the focus in those areas. And finally, the other area, which we have had in the plan over the last couple of years, is to assess the going concern, the idea and the concept of the going concern of the council. And you recall that in 15-16, this risk emerged given the reduction in your reserves at the time. So I want to continue to concentrate on the arrangements that officers have in place in terms of forecasting interim financial planning and forecasting plans for your finances in 1920. So one of the things we'll be doing on that is seeking assurance from your Section 151 officer that from 12 months from July 2019, which is my hope to sign the opinion, that you are going to be liquid, you will have enough cash coming forward in order for you to survive those 12 months from July 2019. Just moving on then, one other item to share with you, materiality. Every year we have to set a materiality. It's our benchmark, it's our error benchmark. And when I come back in July, I will report into you any items that we may find that are over materiality, and then you may have to ask the question whether you want to change your accounts or not. So in terms of materiality for this year, it's set at 200,000. We also had to undertake a value for money conclusion in the public sector, as you're very much aware. Now, in the past 2-3 years, that has been qualified. It has been given an adverse value for money conclusion, which means that we do think that there have been significant arrangements in place to monitor and manage your finances, particularly your financial sustainability. And so when you read on in terms of the plan, I won't go into detail now, but when you do read on, you will see our focus again in 1920 is very much on the financial sustainability of the council and the arrangements that you have in place to achieve that. And then finally, just to confirm the audit fee, you may recall that 2 years ago, you, Cornwall Council, and a number of other bodies in Cornwall went out to tender. You didn't want to be part of the PSAA framework in appointing your auditor. Grant Thornton were successful, thankfully, in getting that tender. So that fee is set by Grant Thornton now. For history, it will always have been set by public sector bodies or the Audit Commission, for instance, as you may recall. That fee and the contract you have is now directly with Grant Thornton, and the fee is set in 1920 at £34,000. And then just to finally confirm, before I come on to the revision of your Section 24 recommendations, we remain independent. There's been a lot of focus lately in terms of external audit, and we need to remain independent. So just assure members that every member of my team and myself remain independent of the Council of the Arts of Scilly, and that is constantly checked and updated as we go through your audit. So before I come on to Section 24, I'm more than happy to take any questions on the plan that we want you to approve and the work that we will be doing over the next 3-4 months.
Any questions for Geraldine, please? Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Sorry, Geraldine. The fee for next year, for 18-19, you said 34,000. In paragraph 7 of the report, it mentions 27,128 plus additional fees. So is there going to be a maximum of 30?
Thank you, Chair. So you recall in the past 3 years we have charged extra in terms of the issues, we should say, in terms of the audit and the longevity of that audit. So we have pitched your 18-19 fee knowing that knowledge. So rather than come in and say we're going to charge you 27,000 like your fee has been set in previous years, what we've done is built into the fact that it is higher risk. We are going to be doing more work, and so therefore it limits and reduces the amount of extra fee you would be charged if you do find any errors.
Okay, so hopefully next year it should go back down to something.
So, when we submitted the tender, we had to provide fees over 3 years, and first year is 34,000, second and third year it comes down on the basis that things
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to welcome Jerry to the meeting and to say that her continuing careful monitoring of our finances is very much appreciated. And can I just check that the ongoing discussions and invitations to the technical update workshops, presumably our 151 officer liaises with you over that and it carries on?
Yes, thanks, Chair. The South 151 officer and the team that work on doing the Isles of Scilly's accounts are always in consultation and working with Grant Thornton and do attend the workshops they put on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Just to confirm that, my team and also Russell's team meet on a regular basis. It's once a month at the moment, but there is constant dialogue given our presence in the area. And 2 days ago, one of our team did meet with Russell's team to discuss the progress on the audit. So we're constantly in dialogue with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do you wish to continue?
Thank you, Chair. So can I ask members to turn to page 19, please, which is the statutory recommendations, which you recall I issued following the 2015-16 audit of your financial statements. So just to bring to your attention, as at December 2018, there were a number of ambers, so items were still in progress, and part of our work under your value for money conclusion this year will be to focus heavily on those ambers as of December 2018, and we would recommend strongly that they start to move to green. It's been 2.5 years now, so we would expect to see some progress now moving from amber to green, and so therefore I will be reporting back to you in July on that progress.
Thank you. Any further questions for Geraldine, please? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just got 3 questions. I'll just fire them off. Capital programmes, I'm reading between the lines. I'm just wondering whether you have any concerns over the amounts, because there's been an increase in the capital programme. Secondly, you make reference to fraudulent transactions, and I was just sort of wondering, how that happens and how much we're talking about. And then the medium-term financial plan, which we and particularly Russell and team have been doing a lot of work on. Do you feel more confident in its existence and the body of it?
Thank you. So in terms of the capital programme, it's one area that as auditors we would focus on given any increase. It's part of the assets work that we do. So it's a general piece of work. However, we will focus attention on the fact that it has increased, and that I think from an audit point of view, that the cost is legitimate and can be charged as capital. So that's where we're coming from on that. In terms of fraudulent transactions, I think you're picking up on the standard audit risk that every single body, whether it be corporate, commercial or public sector, focus on, and that is any manipulation that could occur within your processes. So that's something we have to look at all the time, and we have to also test specific areas for that. So this isn't specific to the Isles of Scilly. This isn't to say that during the planning process we found any fraud. We will seek assurance from your chair and from your Section 151 officer to inform us of whether there has been any fraud anyway, but that's just a standard thing that auditors will focus on, given the industry that we all live and work in. And then finally, in terms of the medium-term financial plan, I think we can note quite clearly, and we'll come on to the annual audit letters in a minute, that there have been some significant improvements around the arrangements in place to even start to calculate your medium-term financial plan. I think 3 years ago you didn't have one. So the fact that you now have a 3-year forward-looking programme is a plus and a bonus, and obviously moving forward, what we will want to do in 18-19 is to dig a little bit deeper and understand if that is really robust and the figures do add up.
Okay, that's encouraging, particularly to hear on the medium-term financial plans. It's been a fair chunk of work, and members and officers have been quite heavily engaged in that and the corporate plans, so that's good to hear.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much, Geraldine. I'd like to, we have a recommendation that members approve 2018-19 audit plan set out in the report. I have a proposer, seconder, please. Councillor Marcus, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, it's unanimous. So the next item on the agenda is item 12, which is the 2016-17 annual audit letter. Thank you, Geraldine.
Thank you, Chair. I think the 16-17 is in your supplementary pack. Supplementary pack 2. So apologies, as I said earlier, if I can do this in sequence. So obviously 16-17 comes before your 17-18 annual audit letter. Have you all found it? Yeah.
It's the separate pack. It's not part of the big supplement pack. It's the separate Supplement Pack 2. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So can I just give you a little bit of a background as to what these two annual audit letters are? Because of the delays in giving an audit opinion over the last few years, we've come slightly out of sync with statutory deadlines. So the two annual audit letters that you have in front of you are statutory requirements in the public sector that every single auditor has to produce, normally in October following when they've issued their opinion. So in terms of your 16-17 annual audit letter, you may recall that back in December when I visited you, we gave an opinion on your 16-17 accounts on the 17th of December. And normally, as I say, this would be 2 or 3 months after that opinion's been issued, so that's why it's on your agenda today. Now, as you've probably read through this annual audit letter, there is nothing different in here that I haven't ever reported to you in the past, because the annual audit letter is just a document that states what the auditor has done and the audit findings report that the auditor has shared with you as part of the financial statements audit. So it's a repeat of our findings and it's a repeat of our work. And I guess for you, more importantly, it's a repeat of your recommendations that we've been making, so section 24. So this report is published. It has to be published on your website so members of the public can read it. And it is also published by public sector audit appointments as well. And it goes to them once you've agreed it. So I wasn't going to go into any detail on your 16-17 or indeed your 17-18 annual audit letter, because members, you will have heard the messages over the last 2 years from me. But again, I'm more than happy to take any questions on the contents.
Thank you. No questions, thank you. Yes, Chief Executive, please.
Just a comment, if I may, just to draw members' attention to one small aspect of both reports. Oh, sorry. Draw attention to a small aspect of both reports, which I'm sure members have mentioned, but it's perhaps worth just pausing on, because it's not a financial figure that you will see elsewhere, but it's a very important matter. And it occurs, well, in a number of places, but page 37 in the first report and page 7 in the report you've just been looking at, where the positive contribution, the great difference, the contribution to the improvement that has been made by the council in the recent past in these matters, it's recognised that a large element of that improvement is due to your strategic collaboration agreement with Cornwall Council and the work, without wishing to embarrass anyone, the work of a number of Cornwall officers on your behalf, one of course being Mr. Ashman. And this is a partnering arrangement. It's not like a normal contract. There's not profits and losses that appear in contract reports. So this is a really key benefit you get from your strategic collaboration with Cornwall. It's worth just noting that in passing, because it won't appear in many places. Of course, looking generally at the issues raised by both excellent reports, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation, please, that members approve the 2018-19 audit plan as set out in the report. Could I have a proposer, Councillor Mumford? The seconder, please. Councillor Guy. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. And we'll move straight on to item 11 on the agenda, which is the 2018. Sorry. It's item 13, the 2017-18 annual audit letter, which I think Geraldine has already outlined. Are there any questions on that, or can we take that recommendation, please? No question. Councillor Mumford, are you proposing then, please? Thank you. A seconder, please, for the 2018-19 audit, sorry, 2017-18 audit letter. Councillor Smith. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. And thank you, Geraldine, very much indeed for your contribution. So we now move on to item 14 on the agenda, which is our budget monitoring paper, the report of our 151 officer, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The budget monitoring report is set out for you. This is the short budget monitoring report that we bring between the quarterly financial updates. We only bring these if there is a variation from what we've previously reported. The January report, as set out in the appendix, you'll see that the forecast net underspend has now increased to £95,000 for the year. That's up from the forecast at the end of December of 64,000. There are a number of minor variations, but there are two significant variations that I need to report on since the December report. One, that there is an increase in staffing cost and payments to the pension fund totaling 175,000, which will be funded from the general reserve. Both those items are reflected in the appendix. And on the forecast on the airport, that has come down by 114,000 compared with the December report. There was a mixture of being slightly over-optimistic on some of the spend that could and would occur during the last quarter of the year, which has been pared back. And unfortunately, there was also an error on forecasting what the full year licensing costs would be. The effect of those two items added together is that the forecast for the airport in terms of the actual spend is down 114,000 for the year-end position. The other item that's on this report, year-end reserve movements. Due to the need to close the accounts much quicker than we have done in the past, and particularly with Scilly with the problems over the last number of years, but with the change in the statutory closure date to the end of May, that means that the accountancy work to do the accounts is done in a very tight time scale. To reflect this, there is a request here to formally delegate the approval of year-end reserve movements to myself. Any reserve movements that are needed to produce the statutory accounts, I will take a delegated decision as the recommendation on that. We will report back those within the outturn report, and members can formally approve them as part of the outturn. If there are any reserve movements that members have a different opinion than the one I have taken, don't be alarmed, that we can put those right in the new year with a transfer between the reserves if that is what members so wish. But this is a sort of an administrative issue to make a timely closure of accounts. We probably need to decide what those reserve movements are in closing the accounts in the next 3 weeks. The accounts are due to be in their first draft next week. We'll make decisions on those reserve movements, and they will need to be done and acted on in the system within the next 3 weeks. So there isn't a time to bring back for member approval. This is standard, I think you'll find across most authorities now that do this to get the timely closure of accounts, that decision needs to be delegated. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Any questions for Russell, please? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding the extra staffing costs, can you just give a little more detail about what this actually is please? Is this outside of the budget? Is this pension funds? I'm a bit unclear about where the 175,000 has come from.
Yeah, it's 175,000, which is related to arrangements that you approved in January.
Right. Okay. Just to make the point, I've asked several times previously for some details on the impacts of staff vacancies on the budget. So can you detail when that will be coming to us? Because it is having an impact on our budget and on services, and we really need to understand that, I think, in the context of the budget.
Yes, I think in the new year, when we do the monitoring, we can develop a element within the quarterly report that identifies in more detail the impact. We'll work with the senior managers. We can obviously produce the numbers, no problem from the financial perspective, but I'll need the commentary from the senior managers and what the impact is on service delivery.
So that'll be due in about 3 months' time then?
Yeah, first quarter. I would say that we'll do it in the quarterly report. We won't do it in this, what I call the monthly flash reports.
Okay, that'd be very encouraging. Thank you. And just moving on to Appendix 1, I mean, again, as I've commented before, I mean, there's a lot of variation here. It's a bit hard to get a handle on. Would you say this is still a bit of a shakedown from the mid-year budget environments that we've had? Because it's really hard, I think, as members to actually say, well, you know, there's huge variances here to really get a handle on it. And although the bottom line is encouraging, a question I've just had really is that at the expense of the general fund? Because I've seen that you're funding this extra staffing cost through the general reserve. So I just want to get a handle on really where we are with this.
Yeah, I think as you've pointed out in previous meetings, there are some significant variations during the year. Some of them we will have reflected in setting the budget for the new year. In particular, I'll say some of the variations in services to our community that we forecast forward in setting next year's budget, that those underspends will continue. So that will hopefully address those variations, as with the other large one on active SILI. I think, as I've said previously, I'm hopeful that as we go through next year, there'll be less variances, but there will still be variances because we've got the slight double whammy that the budget was set on, in some ways, some of the detailed budgets were set on historic spend information. And as we are going through the process of getting a better and cleaner set of spending reports, you're noticing that the actual spend is different than the historic spend. So hopefully we're addressing the larger items first, and we'll smooth out the rest as we go during the next 12 months. But I think this is the journey we're on. We keep saying about it, but it will take a couple of years. And next year will be the second year. So hopefully by the end of that, we will have less variations.
Yeah, all understood. And just that comment on the general fund reserve, is our bottom line looking good because the general fund reserve has taken a dip, or is that not really the case?
No, because the bottom line is measuring against the planned position. The planned position always had a take from the general fund reserve of 100,000. As I've said in the budget reports previously, that is the remainder that was part of the structural deficit. We've addressed that in setting the 1920 budget. Yes, there are the main movement that is in there this year is that one-off cost of extra staffing costs, which we've put in the planned forecast for reserves going forward. So I think we've got a healthy position, which I reported on in the budget report in March for the reserves for the next 3 years, and that's taking into account this take from reserves.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Just to pursue, if I might, one element of that interesting conversation, which was about staffing levels, the number at any one time as against the establishment, because you're never fully recruited. It just never happens. So one of the tricks, as it were, in budgeting is if you're slick, you can anticipate the percentage of understaffing that you will have, and therefore you provide a budget that deals with the anticipated staffing, not the established staffing. So if you get there, you're doing really well. In terms of the impact, and that will be reflected in the annual figures. You'll know what it was after the event anyway. That'll all be there. But in terms of the any impact that might have, my suggestion would be that a member who has an interest in a particular area speaks to the lead member. The lead member then goes and investigates that with the relevant officers, and it could be a topic for conversation at one of your informal meetings.
Thank you. Councillor Williams next. Thank you.
Thank you. I just also wanted to pick up on Councillor Smith's point about vacancies. I was picking up that in Geraldine's audit report there was reference to capacity and looking at capacity not just within the finance team but within the wider authority. And as we're now looking at an ambitious corporate plan with links to a medium-term financial strategy, I think it would be very useful indeed from our point of view to have that wider review of corporate capacity aligned with staffing vacancies, aligned with the ambitions that we're setting ourselves as an authority to move forward. So we're not setting ourselves up to fail, really.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I was just going to slightly disagree with Councillor Smith in that the underspend of 95,000 isn't really that encouraging. It means that we're not delivering stuff or we're not doing stuff as well as we should. But I think, Russell, you answered that in the budgeting errors at the start of the year. So I just want to make sure that underspend isn't really a good thing. So just reiterate that.
Thank you. So we have two recommendations. I'd like to take them together, please. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Mumford, seconded Councillor Grottick. All those in favour, please? Unanimous. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is item 15, which is the staff pay review, which is on page 55. And that's in the hands of our senior manager, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite a complicated process, this pay award, and we spent some time at a workshop on 21st of March with members to explain the intricacies of it. What I hope this report now does is set out what we're required to do. We need to implement the National Pay Award for local government, and that's an award that's negotiated nationally by the National Joint Council and is mandatory. How we implement it allows a little bit of local discretion, and what this report does is set out a number of options in terms of how that's implemented. What we've done is gone for option number 3, that's set out at Appendix A. And the reason why I've gone for option 3 is that by applying an increment on the existing pay structure and then moving across the new pay structure, it's as closely matching to the existing system as we have at the moment. It's least complicated and it protects those on the lowest pay bands. It's also affordable, it's within budget and has already been accounted for within our budget setting for this coming year. So the recommendation before you members is to go with option 3. There are a number of different options available, but we think on balance, that's probably the most appropriate for our authority. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the officer. I attended the workshop. It was very informative, very complex, I would say. And I will go for option 3, propose option 3.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just endorsed what Councillor Guy said. In fact, I wrote virtually the same words in this report. I think the key statement in this very clear report, actually, is paragraph 3, about the key objectives to implement a fair and transparent pay and grading system. And I fully endorse the recommendation, option 3.
Sorry, the next item on the agenda is item 16, the flexi-time scheme on page 83, again in the hands of Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, another item we discussed at our workshop in March. This scheme would work hand in hand with our flexible working arrangements, but would be additional to it. Managed correctly, a flexi-time system can benefit both the business and the employee. Key to its success is mutual trust and support. We need checks and balances in place, and alongside the implementation of flex-time system, we're recommending a senior manager training program, senior officer training program, so that all managers are clear on their responsibilities in terms of its enforcement and ensuring that it supports the business as well as the individuals and the employees. So we put before you a recommendation to put in place a flexi-time system, bring it back to you to check whether those benefits that we've set out within the report have been achieved within 6 months. We'd like to come back and report back to you, but what we'd need to do is implement it once we've done a comprehensive piece of training for our managers to ensure that we have the right checks and balances in place. So the recommendation before you is in 3 parts. One is to approve the scheme. The second is to ensure that it's implemented after management training, and the third is to bring back a report after 6 months to check that its impact is a positive one, both for the employee, for the business and for the community. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll put my hands up. I was one of the first members that had grave concerns about this item. I then reflected on my thoughts. I attended the workshop, which was very informative, I've got to say. I wrote a few things down as well. Technically, it's an internal operation, which technically I don't think it had to come to full council, but I appreciate the officer for bringing it to full council. Originally, it was a 3-year period, which I was totally against, and the new recommendation is a trial period of 6 months. I'm happy to approve all three. Recommend all three options.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yes, sorry, I didn't attend the workshop. So I just had a couple of questions. How many members of staff are impacted by, will be included in the flexi time scheme?
I think it was probably easier for me to answer who's excluded because the majority will be included. So it will be a small amount that are limited. So it would be the customer hub services, obviously, on the phones. It would be some teams in the operational services. However, we have pitched it to managers that if they can propose and make it work for their teams, it's about making it working. It's about making it inclusive for all. However, we recognise that some airport duty crew firefighters, so some sort of 15 to 20 staff up at the airport will likely not be included as they have to attend to planes. So it's the minority that aren't included, but there are other arrangements such as toil and existing sort of pay enhancements under the pay policy statement that will be in existence for those staff.
Okay, so the significant majority will be included.
Yes.
Okay, and just for recommendation 2, when basically, when's the training going to be complete? When's it going to be introduced?
As soon as possible. As soon as we get any approval from you members, then we've got plans in place to take that training through with our staff over the coming month.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to support Councillor Guy's thoughts that it's mainly an operational matter, and if the officers think it will work, then I think it behoves us to support it, which I do. But could I just ask for clarification that recommendation 3 has the inherent capability to cancel if the outcomes are not positive? If the outcomes are not achieving what the officers think after 6 months, is it your intention that you would effectively roll back to their present arrangements?
I'd hope we make it a success and we put the right measures in place, but there's always that option.
Thank you, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly support what Councillor Guy and Councillor Watts said. It was a very good training session, and I think we learned a lot. I'm very supportive of the policy. I think it's a really good one for the council. I just wanted to check regarding the feedback mechanism, monitoring performance, that we are properly engaging what staff feel about it, as opposed very much kind of bottom up as well as a kind of top down look at it. Can you just clarify the details on their feedback, please?
So following the production of the policy, that was taken to the staff consultation group, and it will be my intention that this policy continues to go back for feedback from that staff body. So they will be rolling out amongst their teams, and I would also expect that senior managers try and pick this up at their individual sort of one-to-ones and team meetings so that any feedback can be gathered.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, very keen that that happens, but otherwise very supportive of the policy recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of clarify, how are we going to measure its impact in terms of positivity and negativity? What are the markers for that?
Okay, so some of the things that I'd be looking for would be, I would expect to see if this is a good positive thing for the individual, is a possible reduction in sickness leave, so less absenteeism. In terms of impact from the customer's point of view, I would expect no increase in customer complaints. So there's a number of measures I think we can have that are actually tangible that we can bring back as part of that monitoring process. So if you look at the benefits that we've listed, it's about how do we measure those. So sickness we can quite easily measure. How people feel, how happy they are and how motivated they are in their work is a little bit more difficult, and I think that comes through that feedback mechanism. It's that happy index, isn't it? But I think we also need to monitor the impact on, because the business comes first, so we need to also measure the number of complaints coming in. So if we start to get an increase in the number of complaints because there's not enough cover at the right times of the day, then we do need to get that feedback too. So we may actually have to go up proactively to get some of that feedback. But Usually you get the negative feedback from the public, and you'll be at the far end line of that. So if people aren't having their messages answered or emails answered, then I'm sure you'll be reporting that back to me rather quickly.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's the kind of sickness and absenteeism would be the kind of metrics I'd like to see in a report. And I fully support this about time that the organisation took into account its workers in terms of just taking children to school and stuff. It's been a bit ridiculous, really, so far. Thank you.
Councillor Sims.
I completely endorse all of the recommendations. A conversation I had with someone, I can't remember who it was after the training. It was just that perhaps we could give some thought to, we're quite a small authority. One person's got a job, they're ill or something, and then we have problems because they're the ones that are doing that job. It may possibly just give some thought that somebody does 0.7 of a job, somebody else does 0.3 of it, and that so there's a bit more job share. But I don't mean they're not full time. I mean they do 0.3 of the other person's job as well. Just so there's a little bit of experience of that person one's job if somebody else if they're not available. So that could be perhaps considered in this, though I can see it's not directly related.
On that, Chair, and I think what we're talking about is teams working together for the good of the business, and I think that comes through in team plans. And I think it's not what's in your job description. What's in your job description is you do what you're asked to do, basically. And so I think it's about working as one team, and often that's there. It's the unsaid truth, isn't it, that staff cover for each other. And I think with a motivated staff, we should see more of that. It's that giving a little bit more, going that extra mile, and getting the job done. So I'd hope to see that as part of this as a cultural shift within the council.
Thank you. Well, we have a proposer and a seconder for these recommendations. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 17 on our agenda is the voucher scheme update report. And again, in the hands of Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief report here, just to bring you up to date. With just some good news, really, that we have been successful in securing some further funding for our voucher scheme, our grants to small businesses. Those grants are allowed for a range of different opportunities for businesses to expand, to produce new services, to go online, supporting business growth. And the good news is it runs for another couple of years, and we've got almost the same funding as we had in the first round. We're hoping to support at least another 55 businesses, create a further 22 jobs, and hopefully develop over 30 new products for businesses to produce on the island. So it's good news. If you've got any inquiries about it, Kirsty Graham is supporting the businesses as they apply for the grants through that process, and is in the process of drafting out the leaflet to hand out, and we'll get those to you in due course. So the recommendation is to ratify the acceptance of the funding and to include the funding within the council's budget. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Point number 4, the voucher scheme essential run on similar grounds and lessons have been learned. Are you able to update us as regards voucher scheme money that has been granted, and in a state where we have businesses that don't operate, we have businesses that have sold off the assets and left the islands. How are we able to manage that and ensure that doesn't recur again going forward?
So the advice we've got from government through the grant scheme is this is a grant of last resort. So there is an expectation almost of failure built into this. So they would expect some sort of failure within the process. So 15% is around about the right level. If it's more than that, they'll get a little bit worried. We're monitoring that closely with our case officer. It's going to be the same case officer moving forward into this next round. I think it's uncharted territory, because I think a lot of the other schemes are in a similar across into the mainland that are in a similar position. And I think it's about being clear what the outputs are initially. Hopefully met the initial outputs and then monitoring it through. What we are working with the case officer on is around that enforcement and that ongoing monitoring and support through that grant process. And if we can get the processes right up front and be a little bit more diligent at the start of the process, we should be able to more easily identify those businesses that are less likely to succeed. So we're putting a lot of time and effort in at this stage in reviewing our processes at the start of before we give grants out, so that due diligence is better, so that the likelihood of success should increase for the businesses coming through in the second tranche. That said, there is always an element of failure if you are a grant provider of last resort. And so we're also looking at what our enforcement policies are in terms of any potential clawback from businesses, and the importance of getting that contract right, the wording of that contract right, so there's an element of clawback for the asset or for the funds in the long term. So it's not an exact science, it's unknown territory. We're working with the funders to make sure that we've got appropriate processes and lessons learned. I think the good news is, if you look at the summative assessment, which is the external assessment of the first round of funding, is the outputs were all achieved. So from what the summative assessment says, what the outside consultants are saying is that you've done really well, you have overachieved on your objectives, but within that there's an element of failure. And I think the challenge back to us as grant providers is how to increase the success rate. It is a very low number of failures, but we need to make sure we keep that to an absolute minimum. But generally it was very successful. Everyone remembers the ones that go wrong. They don't remember the ones that go right. So we have tightened our processes up, and we've worked very closely with the funders to make sure we've got learned from the lessons from the previous scheme, and we've got a very good scheme coming forward into the next tranche.
Thank you. There is, I think, continuing on that front, the angst in the community is particularly from those applicants that were refused grant funding on this voucher scheme, who then see businesses retaining assets and not trading, and have no communication, or there's no information in the public domain as to what is being done about this.
There is business confidentiality issues in a lot of these cases, but any businesses that are interested, I would encourage to start discussions with Kirsty now, and let's see if we can support those in getting grants, because our job as a local authority is to get those grants out into the community. So the more the merrier. Let's make sure they're eligible, let's do the right due diligence and support as many businesses as we can.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Phase one specifically excluded childcare providers, and I was wondering if that's going to be the case with round two.
It will indeed. The rules around who's eligible or not have not changed, so it's the same funding pot, so those rules of eligibility will be very similar.
Are they our rules or from outside?
European rules.
Councillor Smith.
Similar question actually regarding primary agricultural production. Will that be excluded?
Yeah, the same rules apply, I'm afraid.
Yeah, okay. And just a question, the feedback on the assessment report, which I thought was very useful, on page 6 of it, reported that there was some criticism, and rightly so, shouldn't all be good. So those criticisms, have they been noted, and is there an action plan drawn up to deal with those?
Since January, we've been working on improved processes, and any areas for improvement, even if it wasn't a criticism, there's room for improvement. So we've worked hard on a new set of processes to ensure that the smooth running of the next phase of the scheme.
Councillor Marcus, please.
So coming back to Councillor Rogers' comments, do you know what the failure rate of businesses in the scheme is?
One is at the moment.
In terms of percentages?
Yeah, so 1 out of 55.
Right. And paragraph 8, these extra, these increases in the revenue budget, are these going to be balanced within the year, within the financial year, or are they carried over? Just thinking in terms of risk for the council.
These increases are increases in the gross spend offset by the grant, so no bottom line impact on net budget within the year. It will be in the gross spend and the income.
Yeah,
so this is just reflecting that the council's medium-term financial plan had recommendations for gross spend and income. You just have to make those amendments as we go through the year to ensure that we're budgeting and then monitoring against the right totals.
So that the impact is actual admin costs and opportunity costs as well, isn't it? So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation here that members ratify the acceptance of the amounts set out below. Can I have a proposer, please, for that recommendation and a seconder? That's Councillor Watt and Councillor Roger. Thank you. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item 18 on the agenda is our Smart Islands Update ERDF funding bid. Again, Nicola, you're going to need a prize for all these today,
Nicola. A couple more after this one, so hold on to your seats. Okay, so this one relates to a bid. We've put an outline bid for funding. So this doesn't commit us at this stage, but the ERDF funding is coming to an end. So this is for low carbon projects. The last bid, the last call for funding was a £20 million pot, and that closed on the 22nd of March. And we've sought some funding for a project that Wavetricity is the name of the company that we're working with on this project, which is looking at increasing our renewable energy on the islands. The bid relates to an offshore renewable energy platform to generate 2 megawatts of power from a mix of wind, tidal and solar power. That will be sufficient to power about 500 homes on the island. So to just give you the scale, the renewable energy solar panels that we've done with Hitachi Power 50, so it gives you an indication of the sort of scale that we're looking at here. So working with the private sector, the match funding comes from the grant, the private sector match will come from the business itself. There's no match required by the council in the outline bid. This is the first stage. If we're successful, we'll be asked to do a full business case. And it's the full business case that would need to come to council for approval. It's similar to the Go EV project, where we're not putting any council match as such, but there will be some of my time to go into working with the project team on this. And Wavetricity, who are the private sector, have offered and provided the project manager to help us coordinate activity from the council's point of view to minimise the impact on our capacity, learning from lessons of previous projects. So the recommendations are to note and endorse the outline application for funding, doesn't commit us at this stage, and if we are successful, to then develop the full business case, utilising that resource, that external resource to do that work. And that recommendation is for you members to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Any questions on that, please? Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much. It sounds very exciting, but I was just wondering at what stage we'll know whether we've been successful in that partnership approach.
It'll be another month or so before we hear back. So it'll be towards the end of May before we get a decision on whether we've been successful in this round of funding. If we are, then we'll then start developing, the company will start developing the full business case now, in hopeful that they will get the funding in May. We won't be putting much effort into that process at this stage until we hear back, because what we find is that, you know, it's difficult. You put resource into something you might be successful on. Are you proactive or reactive? Lessons learnt from previous bids is perhaps, you know, wait a little bit, get an insight as to whether we're going to be successful or not before we do the next set of work. So that's why I've asked for the private sector to provide the project management support at this stage. But I would expect to hear back at probably around the, I think it's 24th, 25th of May.
It would be really helpful if we are successful to have a very short workshop, perhaps at a very early stage in the project, just so members are totally on board from the start, really. That'd be appreciated.
I will arrange that. Even if we aren't successful, it might be worth having a presentation around what we're doing around Smart Islands again in the near future.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Just in terms of the Wavetricity project, I know my initial view, it was too good to be true. It looks absolutely brilliant what they can potentially do. I've talked to the MD, Simon, a couple of times, and it does tick an alarming number of boxes for us if it comes off. And if anybody wants to know a little bit more about it, I'm happy to tell them outside of the meeting. But it looks like it's almost like a golden ticket for us, really. It looks wonderful.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
Haven't got an agreed route. So there are different stages in grant applications. So you've got an expression of interest, an outline stage, and then a full business stage. What we need to find, working with scrutiny, is how we engage through scrutiny in that process. I think it's a discussion outside of this meeting about how we make that work effectively. It's certainly on the work agenda for us as a corporate leadership team to get some clarity over that process. So we absolutely need to work out what needs to go where, how we keep members informed, and what the decision-making process is. So that is work in progress. I'm looking towards the Chief Exec now, but that is work in progress, as I understand.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
It's still my understanding with the electricity project, there would be zero capital input from the council. They were very clear about that, just in case people are sort of bothered about it's going to be a drain on council funds. They don't want any money from anybody for this, well, apart from, not from us anyway.
Correct. There's no call on the council, but that will be part of the full business case that I'll bring to you before we make that submission.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fully supportive of the thrust of this proposal. However, I am frustrated that, again, I think we're in this position, as we went through the mill a bit with this in December 2018 regarding Smart Islands projects, that they should be coming to us before applications. I understand the reasons around timescales, but nonetheless, I think there could have been more communication to members. I certainly very much like to see a full business case coming to us and for us to fully endorse it or not. Just a question around the risk assessment on long-term assets. Should it come off, would this reside with the community venture long-term?
So the part of the business case is to develop that model for future delivery. It looks, the proposal at the outline stage is potentially a 50-50 joint venture between Wave Electricity and the community venture, so the asset would have 50% value with the community venture. That's yet to be worked out and what goes part of that business case.
Okay. I would then flag up, going back to those recommendations in December 2018, that council is meant to be working with community venture on risk and business plans. That was a recommendation. So that is an action that we do need to take forward, and I'd be looking for that to happen in the near future.
Chairman, the community venture, just as an update, has secured funding through the work they're doing at the moment with the electric vehicle project until June 2021. So that community venture is secure at this present time. What we are exploring this year, not this month, is a range of different funding opportunities that will look into the longer term. So you might want to report tomorrow, but I'd rather bring a report once we've explored all those opportunities and all those funding options before we bring something back to members. If I bring a report back tomorrow, it'll be the same as December. It'll be an update on where we are from December. I think what we need to do is look at all those funding options and opportunities, and we've got a number of irons in the fire at the moment. And once we've got answers back on those, I think it would be the appropriate time to bring that to you.
Yeah, that'd be very welcome. And as identified before, the risk of community venture failing, which I sincerely hope it never does, is to the council. So that's why we need to be very vigilant to that, I think. Thank you.
I would comment, Councillor Smith, as members probably realise, our lead member for Smart Island is somewhat incapacitated at the moment, having had a major operation. So hopefully when she's a little bit fitter, she can liaise on some of your concerns, Councillor Smith, with Nicola. Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, I'd support a workshop because I'm struggling from this paper to find out just to balance the pros and cons and the benefits for all the parties. And just paragraph 12, it says that will need to be funded from the existing capital development projects, the developing full business case. Is that an extra, is that within the capital budget at the moment, or is that an extra cost?
The only cost at this stage in developing the project will be any of my time that's put into it. So it wasn't the paragraph I had. I think maybe Russell put that in, which probably just needs some clarification. But the full business case will be worked up by the private sector partner. Will be a signature to that. It'll take a little bit of my time to work with them to make sure that says the right things in the right way.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't just come in there. Yeah, although no cost to the authority, depending on the arrangement of whether the council is the lead, the accountable body, although there may be no council resources, it may well come through the council's accounts as a scheme, which will mean that we would have to gross up the capital programme at that point if that was the forward. So although we may not put our own resources into it, we may still have to account for it through the council's accounting system and through our accounts. And obviously, as laid out there, that will bring the risk of accounting for it being the accountable body, and the business case will need to address how we mitigate that as much as possible.
And I'm sure there'll be legal costs involved, so
Thank you. So we have the two recommendations before you. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Sims, a seconder. Councillor Mumford. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. So item 19 is also on Smart Islands, again in the hands of Nicola, an update on the waste to energy proposals. Thank you.
It's been a busy few months, hasn't it? Yeah, so I will start with an apology here. In December, I wanted to bring you the full business case on this project, waste to energy, prior to submission for the full business case. The deadlines we were given in terms of submission were somewhat more restricted than I thought. So we put an expression of interest in at the end of February, and we got a decision on that expression of interest for funding on the 8th of March. They asked for a full Green Book Treasury business case by the 5th of April. That didn't allow me to bring anything to council. What we do have now is time to bring that full business case and supporting evidence to you in May, ahead of the LEP decision on whether that to support this funding bid. So the LEP will hear this case on the 29th of May, and I'll bring you the full business case at our meeting on the 14th of May. So should you decide we don't want to go for funding, we can withdraw at that stage in the process. I can only apologise. I wasn't quite expecting a 3-week turnaround of a full business case. I think the quickest one I've written before was 3 months. All credit to Helen Pearce and Helen Richards, who really pulled the stops out and worked many long hours to get an application in. You've got to be in it to win it, I say. And I thought if we didn't get something in, we would lose the opportunity for funding. At the moment, we've got some funding earmarked from the LEP for an anaerobic digester and gasifier. Because the feasibility work is coming out and suggesting that that might not be the right solution, they're looking towards an in-vessel composter and thermal treatment. It means that 1.9 million that has already been allocated to is at risk. And unless we put an application into this funding pot, we would potentially have no funding available for our project at all. So it was worth taking the chance. I apologise for doing that, but I just didn't feel we had the opportunity to bring anything to council in the timescale that we were given. But we do have an opportunity to go into full detail on this in the main council meeting. And what it does mean is I would hope that we can get perhaps that full business case circulated next week to allow time for you to then digest it and perhaps have a workshop on it before next council, so we can go into the full financial implications and the benefits of that proposal. So my suggestion to you members is that we take the recommendations as noted, but actually take this to next May council, and ahead of May council we have a workshop on it so that we can get both Helen Pearce and Helen Richards here to help explain the processes that are included here, the risks, the management of that risk and the opportunity and the financial case as well. So I hope, with my apologies, that we'll be able to follow this recommendation, but we can withdraw the application at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Again, fully supportive of the principle of this. Just a question around that feasibility report. Is that for public consumption? Because I haven't seen sight of that yet.
Seen the final draft, but not the final version. It's not been published yet, so I am still awaiting it myself. I've seen the full details, but it hasn't actually been published yet, which is why I couldn't bring that either to this meeting.
Right, okay. Again, just sort of voice my concerns with the frustration of the process, understand the issues you faced, and sounds like the team's done a really good job to get the application in. But I think we do need to get our procedures in place as a council as a whole to ensure that this business case is coming before members before we put, just to work ahead. I think that's where we need to be heading, isn't it? Because it's not working very well at the minute. But yeah, look forward to the full business case in the workshop.
Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, just to reiterate, getting the information out to us as soon as you can, and learning from the workshop we had with the GoEV stuff. That was actually, we got lots of stuff resolved and lots of knowledge out there. So yeah, I reluctantly support the recommendation.
Thank you, and I confirm I will arrange with Nicola that we have that workshop prior to the main meeting, giving you as much time as possible. So we have a proposer for the recommendation, seconder from Councillor Smith. That the proposal was from Councillor Marcus. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. So item 20 on our agenda is the health and safety policy, which is the report of our senior officer, Mike Coates. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, Mike Coates wrote the report, but Nicola's going to outline it to you. My apologies.
He'll answer the questions, yeah. Okay. So basically, this is an update of our existing health and safety policy. Legislation, as set out in paragraph 1 of the report, places a duty on the council in relation to health and safety. And to meet that obligation, we do need a health and safety policy that's up to date and reflects our current procedures and actions. So there's been some good work done through HASAG and through Mike and his team to make sure we've got an up-to-date policy. And that policy's been involved people from across the organisation, from the front line right up to service managers. And we've got now much clearer lines of communications, clarity of roles and responsibilities, and the provision of training as part of that policy, and a better incident and accident reporting process. So our recommendation is to adopt the updated policy and that we continue to review it on an annual basis. Thank you.
Any questions, please? Councillor Grottick.
Thank you. If you could turn to page 99, it suggests that members should nominate an elected member representative for appointment to the HASAG committee. My understanding is that Steve Watt has actually been doing an excellent job, and I would like to nominate him to continue in his role, please. So we could perhaps make that recommendation too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm quite happy to carry on my role. There have been 2 meetings, and for a slight history, though I actually took the chairman's place because he was busy on the mainland, I think, for the meeting. So I took his place, and he said at the time, you'll probably find it very interesting. And I thought I'd take that with a pinch of salt. But in actual fact, it really was. And I was so interested, I actually tried to get to the next meeting, but I only managed the last 10 minutes because of a clash with another meeting in this chamber. So in short, yes, I'm quite happy to be the elected representative on the HASAG.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Can we just make sure that that post is elected every May, just so that we've got continuity and make sure that rather than it just getting lost in the so Andy, can you make sure that happens, please?
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's great policy, very much support it. I'll just actually pick up another point on page 99 alongside Councillor Grottick. members should ensure that suitable resources are available and strategic direction aligned. Are suitable resources available? Is there anything we need to be concerned about for the implementation of this?
That was covered in the application. All the resources for health and safety have been planned out within the medium-term financial plan. So plan is service, high service really, so what's requested.
Good.
Councillor Marcus.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, competent person, has one been identified?
For which position? Is this for the HASAG group or for the? Yes. It's based. We're quite fortunate, competent person-wise, to have myself and Sandy as chartered members of the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. So we've got quite a high level of competency, within the council, and people are chosen on the group based on their skills, experience, and knowledge. And from the group we've got at the moment, I'm very satisfied that we've got competent people in place for the HASAG group.
Brilliant. So we've got that strength and depth there in some redundancy to make sure that things can continue on even when it's not here. Brilliant.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just like to thank the officers involved in the health and safety policy of 2019. Very good, very in-depth and very informative for all. And secondly, I'd like to second Councillor Grottick's proposal, Steve Watt to be the member. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation, please, that members approve the health and safety policy, which is proposed by Councillor Grottick, with the joint proposal that Councillor Watt is our HASAG member, and that's seconded by Councillor Guy. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous. Thank you. At this juncture, I'd like to thank Mike for his work, but I would also like to thank Nicola, who's had a huge number of items on our council agenda today and a huge workload she's had to fit in this last month, trying to get a few days leave as well. So she's really been burning the midnight oil, and thank you very much, Nicola, for all your efforts this month. So we come to item 21 on our agenda, which is the community fund applications. I would like to just bring a point to members before we start, that in order for us to be able to consider the grant applications from the Isles of Scilly Folk Club and the St Mary's Theatre Club, we need to suspend Standing Order 12.19, the 6-month rule. This is able to be done under Standing Order 1.2, and the monitoring officer has confirmed that this is lawful. Can I therefore please have a mover for that? Councillor Marcus, seconded by Councillor Watt. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. So I now hand over to Tom Walton, who will present the applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There are 6 community fund applications for members to consider. 2 are resubmitted, as the Chairman's just acknowledged, having been previously considered at last month's meeting, and there are 4 new applications. £2,800 will be rolled over from last year's community fund, bringing the total pot available for 2019 to 20 to £6,300. £700 of this has already been committed to the Christmas Lights Fund, so that leaves £5,600 uncommitted for this year. The total amount being requested from the community fund at this meeting by the 6 applications is £5,915. This exceeds the current uncommitted funds by £315. Members can't spend more than the agreed budget, therefore they must either reject some of the applications or award a lower amount than requested to some or all of the applicants. The community fund policy states that once the annual budget has been allocated, no further applications will be progressed in the financial year. So given that we're at the start of the financial year, members may wish to consider whether they want to retain a balance in the community fund for future applications. So this would require awarding substantially less than has been requested across the 6 applications being considered here. So it's over to members to consider how much they wish to allocate to each of these applications.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Transition Silly application for £2,000. Can I ask that be deferred, please? Basically, reasons are bees are in decline on Scilly. There is the Viola, I think I've pronounced that right, Viola virus still around, and cross-contamination. So I'd like more information on the £2,000 request.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. We'll deal with that when we come to that recommendation. Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
I would not support deferring the application. I would rather this just gets done now. We've had 2 meetings around this. We've probably spent more money talking about the community fund than actually is in the community fund. So I'd rather just get it done. My suggestion would be to approve everything and just take the 315 out of the Transition Silly application as the largest application there.
Thank you. Can I just get that clear? Were you suggesting to defer the item 4?
I was suggesting that we approve everything except we reduce the Transition Silly amount by £315.
Thank you for that, Councillor Marcus. We'll deal with that shortly. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. I agree it's regrettable in a way that we've come back for, if you like, for a second bite of the cherry, but I think it was legitimate because we asked for more information. And I don't agree with that. I'm afraid I can't agree with that because there are 2 applications where I think there are legitimate reasons for deferral. Item number 4, if, as Councillor Guy has suggested, there is an issue with the import of bees to the islands, then this would not be an appropriate community fund grant. And also I understand there are some issues that Councillor Roger would like to explain about item number 6. Therefore, I would like us to take each application number 6. I would like to suggest that we quickly and smoothly take each item in turn so that we can debate it in turn and hopefully leave some money in the pot for future applications.
Thank you. Councillor Roger.
Yes, regarding the Taste of Scilly Market Group, a couple of concerns on that. One, they state in their information that they've been fully supported by the Islands Partnership. I believe they met with the Executive Director back in January, but have had very little contact with the partnership since then. With regarding specific market stalls, we have 10 perfectly good and able market stalls on this island that are in the remit of the Islands Partnership, which get very, very little use. And I'd like to see from this applicant why they have chosen not to make use of those market stalls rather than go out and buy some more.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Coming back to the Transition Silly, the reason I brought this to full council is a number of the members of the public have approached me on the issue. That's why I brought it, and I'm going to retract what I've said, defer it, and I'm going to ask for a refusal on it.
Chairman, perhaps I could suggest that we do take items one by one, otherwise it may get slightly vague as to what we're actually talking about. So can we go through it one by one, please?
Yes, we can, certainly. In fact, I just wanted to have comment about this. I was going to take them one by one when we come to the actual recommendations, but I would just like to invite any further comment and then we'll take them one by one on the recommendations that's in front of you. Right, seems we've had all our comment. Thank you. So we will go back to recommendation 1, which is the Isles of Scilly Folk Club for £1,000 of support. Councillor Mumford. Seconded by Councillor Guy. Councillor Grottick.
I was going to propose so that we had a little bit more money in the pot, that we actually amended that. I know they have already amended their request from 1,500 to 1,000, but would you be happy to support giving them £800? Do you think that would be a reasonable compromise, Councillor Mumford? Okay, I stand back.
Okay, thank you. Well, Councillor Grottick has stood back on that. So we have a proposer and a seconder for £1,000 for the Folk Club. All those in favour, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Thank you. And any against? Any abstentions? 1. That's carried. Thank you. So item 2 on the agenda is the St Mary's Theatre Club. Sorry. No, it means Theatre Club, I think. So item 2, the Theatre Club. Can we have a proposer on that recommendation, please? Councillor Watt, seconder. Councillor Mumford.
Sorry.
Councillor Marcus.
Are we, last time we had this meeting, we were discussing, I think Joel brought up about multi-year commitments. This proposal is for a 3-year commitment. Do members want to take that in mind before they accept that proposal? And maybe amend it?
Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. Can I amend it, this proposal to awarding 315 from this year's Community Fund to support the One Act play for this year, 2019? And can I then suggest to them respectfully that they ask us again for the following years? I think that's entirely reasonable.
Okay, so we have an amendment to item 2 that we just deal with the amount for this year. And I have a proposer and seconder.
Can I just ask a question of perhaps of Tom, because there are 2 payments for this out of this year's community fund. So just to clarify exactly what the situation is for voting would be helpful.
I think we're saying that we pay them £315 in this financial year. Is that correct? Sorry,
so
Tom.
the way it's fallen, and because of when they have the One Act play, it means in effect you're taking 2 payments out of 1 year. So they could come back and request the 2020 money, say in March or February next calendar year, but it would come out of the same pot of money. So you should be mindful of that when allocating funds. If you want to leave £300 available to spend in, say, March next year, just be mindful of that now so it doesn't get overcommitted.
Thank you.
So I would propose a further amendment on this one, that we pay a grant of 315 and 300 and leave the final one out for 2021.
Has the first amendment been withdrawn then, Chairman? Because we do need to take them one by one.
Yes, that's been withdrawn. And so we have a proposer that we take the first 2 items, that's 315 plus 300, and that's proposed by Councillor Roger, seconded by Councillor Mumford. But we defer the third amount of £300. So all those in favour, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Any against? 1. Thank you. That's passed. So item 3 of the recommendations, which is for the Five Islands Football Club for £1,000. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Guy, a seconder, Councillor Roger. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 4, that members determine the application for Transition Scilly for £2,000. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I propose we refuse the application for Transaction Scilly for the sum of £2,000 to acquisition for beehives, please?
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Mumford?
Can we?
Sorry.
Well,
Chairman, is there a reason for that?
yeah, can we have some scientific basis for that, please?
As I said, I've spoken to a few beekeepers on the island. There's a decline in bees. That's the main reason. And the Ora virus is a concern. Why have 4 beehives when you aren't sure you're going to have bees to go in them?
Councillor Marcus.
Hearsay is not scientific proof. That just speaking to people, I don't see any evidence in front of me that that is the case. If there's a decline in something, you don't take stuff away from it to prevent that decline. You add and encourage growth to prevent decline. I think what we could do with this application is to reduce the size of the application, but to refuse it outright, I don't think is sending out a good message. But supporting the diverse ecology and ecological understanding, especially when we've got the next paper when it's about the climate crisis within the whole planet. What kind of messages are we trying to send out to the community?
Could I just come in here, which might help further discussion? Our monitoring officer suggests that we defer this item in order to get evidence before we make a decision. Thank you. Councillor Legg.
If we defer it and then approve the others, we would spend all our money before we'd given it to it. So that's effectively determining it, is it not?
Have we got?
I'm not sure that we will have done, will we, Tom? Because we're already got £300 saved from the application around the theatre club. Is that right?
Well, you won't necessarily overcommit at this meeting if you stay within budget. However, the risk is there'll be an additional application by the next month or the month afterwards, and then this current application will have to compete against that one. So there is an increased risk that this won't get the funding, but that's something that members will need to consider.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I would support the monitoring officer's position. There's enough uncertainty in the room about it to advise caution. I think we need advice from the likes of Natural England on what the legal position is regarding the importation of bees and how it would leave us standing. And I think all this just highlights how important the review of this grant scheme is, so that we're not having grants coming in. We need clear windows where applicants know who when to get a grant in, when it will be decided, and the process at the moment is just all too ad hoc to me. So I would support the position of having a deferral to get that independent advice on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest that we defer this for want of more information. There's obviously concern in the community that there could be an infective agent brought into these islands, and also the fact that there's a decline, a natural or a decline, an unexplained decline at present in bees in the islands. I think that we need more information that that the Transition Scilly has done their homework on this, and I think we need to be reassured that we're not aiding and abetting something that might be detrimental to the islands. But on the other hand, I quite accept that we're not in any way suggesting that we don't agree with the work that Transition Scilly does.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Chairman. I endorse what Councillor Davis just said. I'd just like for the record to state my first recommendation was what has just been echoed around the room. For more information and deferral. That was my first recommendation, for more information. And for the record as well, on evidence. There are 2 beekeepers that do it for a living or make a living out of it, where I did gather some information as well, for the record.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
For the purpose of the minutes, as we stand at the moment, there is one motion proposed. Members don't make recommendations, members don't do anything else, they move motions. There is one motion proposed by Councillor Guy, which is to refuse the grant to the Transition Scilly. We need to establish, is that withdrawn?
After what's been said around the room, I will withdraw that for more information, like I stated in the first one.
It's simply withdrawn, thank you.
I would second that second proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
I'd just like to make it clear that in no part of the application would they say they were going to import bees to the island. So, but I would support a deferral. I would propose that we defer this application till next month.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder for deferral of this application. All those in favour? How many? 6, 7. Any against? Any abstentions? 1. Thank you. So, item 5 recommendation that members approve an application from Drama Express for £500 to support a series of workshops and performances for children and young people with additional support needs. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. I propose that we allocate the money as requested.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford. Second that. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. And the last recommendation that members determine whether to approve the community fund application from Taste of Scilly Market for £800. Councillor Roger.
Can I just qualify my previous comments? I am not happy with this because of the market stall situation, but I totally endorse the philosophy of this initiative.
So,
Councillor Marcus,
do you want to defer this?
Yeah, I would propose a deferral of this until there's more clarification on the market stall situation and why they can't utilise the existing market stalls on the island and bring back a reason for more purchase or bring back another idea on how we could help fund them.
Thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for that proposal, please, for deferral? Councillor Davis. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. So we move on to item 22 on the agenda, which is the school strike for climate petition. Do we want to just wait for Councillor Smith, please?
Harry's declared an interest.
Sorry. Sorry.
No, sorry, yes.
Okay, so the school strike for climate, which is on page 105. I would just like to comment before we take this item that I visited the school recently in the last couple of weeks just to speak to the head of the academy and the head teacher and indeed the pupils who were involved in bringing us this petition, just to update them of the fact that we were going to consider this today at full council and we would then take the matter on their behalf, if council agrees, to central government. So I just wanted to keep them in the picture of what was happening. So that was done. So can I ask Jonathan Smith, please, to comment on this.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what we saw on March 15th with the school march to the town hall was something unprecedented on Scilly. About 170, 180 school children marching from school to hand the petition to the chairman, which is detailed in the pack there. This was in line with an international movement on school strikes for climate change. And something, as I've campaigned on climate change for sort of 10 years or so, I fully support. In addition to the chairman visiting the school, I also recently visited the school to meet with the leaders of the school march, 3 of the pupils, to discuss their plans and to discuss what I was going to try and assist with council for. They were very encouraged with this process, and I also challenged them to indeed challenge their own school, the academy, to reduce their carbon emissions. So it's very much a kind of a partnership approach and something I'll be helping them to work on. Just to set this in context, the climate emergency motions have been making their way through various local authorities over the past few months, and to date there are 51 local authorities that have declared a climate emergency in the UK. That's out of a total of 418. Essentially, this is on the back of the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change making recommendations that there are 12 years for us as a global society to keep carbon emissions under control, i.e. we have to act fast. Therefore, I'm proposing 8 recommendations to council today, which I've handed around paper copies of and sent around an email to endorse this. Would you like me to read these out, or would you read them on paper?
No, I'm happy that everyone's had a copy of it. Thank you. There are, though, if you could just make clear the slight amendments that have been made, please.
I will. The amendment actually in consultation with the monitoring officer was just on proposal 1. The members thank the petitioners for the school strike for climate petition and seek future endorsement for the 4 demands to government as set out in paragraph 5, i.e. that we're not endorsing them today, but we will look at those and see if we want to agree with those in the future. Otherwise, it's essentially a position of endorsing the concept of a climate emergency, of engaging with government to provide us resources to help achieve us become carbon neutral by 2030, and then importantly to set up a climate working group, including members and officers, to work up proposals which will then bring back to full council within 6 months, so by October 2019, to see what the options are for us to start seriously reducing our carbon emissions and aiming carbon neutrality by 2030.
Can I just clarify, Chairman, that what Councillor Smith has said is that the proposal which is set out in paragraph 1 of his motion, what he's actually suggesting is that the recommendation 1 on the report at page 105 be substituted for it.
Sorry, just say that again.
That the recommendation in the actual report on page 105, that members thank the petitioner for the school strike for climate petition, which seeks council endorsement to the 4 demands to government set out in paragraph 5 of this report, be substituted for your paragraph 1.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Endorsing or seeking to endorse the petitioners. There's a material difference there.
Councillor Watt.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't disagree with anything that Councillor Smith has said, but I will correct him on one statement he made right at the beginning when he said it was an unprecedented initiative by the school. I remember 37 years ago there was an organisation called RARE, the Residents Against Runway Extension, which tried to stop the repaving of our runway at the airport at the time. So it's not quite correct, but I do endorse everything he said.
Chief Executive, please.
There are 2 small points, if I may. The first is that I'd suggest that at the beginning of paragraph 5, the working group will be entirely made up of members, but it will be supported by officers. And at the beginning of paragraph 6, we'll have to decide, the leadership there it implies is officer leadership. We'll have to decide who that is. My colleagues are all now tying their shoelaces. And we'll have to decide if we've got the relevant expertise. So we might have to spend some money on this. I'll have to find a budget from somewhere.
To what the Chief Executive said, Chairman. Paragraph 5, the issue of the working group being formed was simply that it would not then be a committee of the council if it has senior manager and other staff on it. So it is a matter for council whether it wishes to set up a formal committee, which would the effect of not having members on it, or whether in fact it goes along with paragraph 5 of Councillor Smith's motion, which would mean therefore it would be a working group.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy just for it to be a fairly informal working group. That's absolutely fine as far as
yes,
I'm
because
concerned.
otherwise would have to be public notice given. There would be a bureaucracy, and there would be therefore something that perhaps members wouldn't want to do.
And if the Chief Executive is not able to release officers to the group, that's obviously a decision for him to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I, of course, agree with the whole sentiment of it. I think it's unfortunate that we've had it so late and now the debate is more around the technicalities rather than the sort of the key message. And just if we do declare a climate emergency, I just wanted to make sure we're not committing ourselves to any legal, financial constraints at this point in time that we're not aware of.
Yeah, that's certainly my intention with this was an ambition, not a legal obligation, as far as I know.
But I'd just love to have seen a sort of a full report which had been presented so we could have a full debate, giving a sort of full support to it rather than just now debating the whole technicalities of what that means and what that means. It's just slightly unfortunate, I feel.
Councillor Sims.
I think we could possibly just caveat the points with subject to arrangement, really, because this is essentially we probably need some sort of terms of reference, but I think this is a very good first stage to move it forward. I don't think, Jonathan, any expectation we'd end up with a working model today.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Okay, so to answer Joel's point, I think this is really ambitious. The Isles of Scilly has got to be one of the most carbon intensive communities in the United Kingdom. So to become carbon neutral by 2030 is going to take a lot of effort from our partners, from the council itself, and a lot of societal change and individual change from the residents and from our main income base, i.e. tourists. So if members are up for that challenge, and that includes changing one's own behaviour, not alone just pushing it out towards the council, then yeah, I fully endorse this. And we are doing the Smart Island stuff, but that is only that's societal change rather than individual change. What we have to do is change as individuals as well as society.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Point 3, to achieve the target for the Council of the Isles of Scilly to be carbon neutral, I don't know if you would better change that to the Isles of Scilly.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, yeah.
Really ambitious.
It is, but and I do agree. But then again, if you have an easily achievable ambition, it's not particularly ambitious either, is it? And the other point, I know we removed endorsing the 4 demands. I think I have no issue with the 4 demands, but myself personally, but I think a number of members may have issues with reducing the voting age down to 16. I mean, that's probably the most contentious part of that, which some people may have issues with. This is the school demands on page 106. It's just the 4th one is possibly not as issue-free as the others.
Thank you. Yeah.
If I could just help with that, there's no need to debate of course you may if you wish to, but there's no need to debate the detail of the 4 demands because you're not endorsing them.
Thank you. Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just coming briefly on this. The report that was in the agenda clearly said under financial implications there are no direct financial implications to this report. If the amendment has financial implications, they will need to be accommodated within either existing budgets or be part of a further report to request future funds.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just to come back on a couple of those, particularly on Councillor Marcus's point, I think we should recognise that actually climate change is a significant risk to the council and to the islands. That needs to be recognised. But also I think in a very positive sense, the thrust from IP is very much about the islands being marketed as a kind of a green destination, and achieving this is a big plus, I think, for tourism on the islands. People see the Isles of Scilly as a very green place, as pointed out, is actually not in carbon terms, and it needs to be. And let's not forget what we've just discussed around the Wavetricity project, very forward-reaching and just what we need. And this perfectly fits into this ambition to become carbon neutral. And just to respond on Russell Ashman's point, yeah, of course, absolutely. And that's the whole idea of the working group and working out proposals.
Thank you. Well, we've had this moved by Councillor Smith. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Sims. All those in favour? Sorry, as amended. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. So item 23 on our agenda is the council calendar, which is in the safe pair of hands of Andy Thomas.
I'm sure you've all read this very closely, so I'll leave it open to the floor to tell me what they think about it.
Sorry, Andy, the paper copy has got red in it in terms of the school dates. Which ones are clashing?
Yeah, sorry, we had a copier issue. I think there's only one. You just let me find it.
I have red bits on mine. It's the 9th of April 2020 and the 3rd of September 2019. That's an IFCA meeting and a licensing committee meeting. No others are red, so as I have some red, I assume that's it.
That's correct. Yeah, thanks, Harry. Thanks, Councillor Legge.
The monitoring officer just has a word, please.
Yes, Chairman. Unfortunately, due to a personal commitment, the 20th of June does give some problems. Is it possible for it to be considered to be moved earlier that week? I have raised it before, but I thought I would raise it this evening rather than kind of bounce it. But just give consideration. Has any member got any objection to move it earlier that week, and then we can sort out the precise date? The 20th of June.
Does anyone know which day of the week that is?
Thursday, Chairman.
Yeah, can we move it to the Tuesday? Would members be happy with that?
I mean, we can, I said...
Russell, are you... While we're considering that, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Most of our meetings, like this morning's, go on for 2.5 hours at least. I just wonder whether we really need to give consideration to starting meetings earlier than 6:30. It's not unusual last year for pretty much all off-island representatives to have to leave at a certain point, which doesn't demonstrate good democracy. So I just wonder whether members have any view on that.
I would support that. Just support it, start at 5:30, or if that's all right with officers.
Thank you. Can we just go back to Russell on that? So the 18th of June. Okay. Councillor Sims.
I won't be able to attend a single summer meeting if it starts at 5:30. So I could manage 6 o'clock, but it's going to be teeth, but I certainly couldn't manage 5:30.
6 o'clock, what time are the last boats?
Down here by 5:15, so that's fine.
No, leaving, sorry, leaving.
It has to be a special, probably.
So are you happy to compromise at 6 o'clock? Yeah.
Fine from my point of view.
Yeah, that's fine by mine.
Before we take this with the amendments, I just have one comment that the November meeting is only, sorry, we've got, yeah, it's only 3 weeks. So I was going to suggest that that's put back to the 14th of November, if members think that's a good idea. Okay.
Chair, might I ask for the purpose of the minutes, the proposed change to 6 o'clock from 6:30 is for all the council meetings that are currently at 6:30 p.m. That's the proposal. And what about the IFCA meetings that are at 6:30? Is it proposed to move them to 6:30? Do I see nods? I don't see no. Okay, so whoever it was that moved the motion to change the dates, it's council meetings to be 6 rather than 6:30, full stop. And then there's the separate amendment for the 14th of November.
And the 18th, of June.
Thank you.
Councillor Mumford.
Does that include the scrutiny meeting on July the 4th? That's an evening one.
That's a matter for you, Chairman.
Change it to 6. Can we change that one to 6 o'clock then? Please?
Okay.
Might be easier.
Scrutiny to 6 o'clock. Councillor Sims.
It might be useful to maybe make it more formal, where possible, to have 28 days between meetings at least, because the 3-week ones are frankly a damn nuisance sometimes. So just to formalise that a little bit, and obviously there may well be meetings you have to have for specific purposes.
Chairman, just by way of explanations, it doesn't always work perfectly in as much as finance will want something in terms of a Q1, Q2, Q3 updates, etc. at certain dates, times. The school holidays fall at certain times. And so it's never a straight 28-day split that we can do on these things. So it's as near as possible, whilst also trying to maintain a monthly council. So that's my explanation. So
Are you happy that it's as near as possible? Thank you.
Yeah, I get that. Where possible,
Yeah.
just try and aim for 28 days between.
Thank
I
you.
think that certainly the November one, moving that to the following week, absolutely fine, because
Yeah.
that's further away from half term.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mumford? Okay. Councillor Sims?
This isn't directly related to this, but I was asked it yesterday by somebody. Where the school is now an academy, can employees of the school now stand for council? I just thought I'd ask this now.
Because I'm an employee of the school.
That's what I was thinking. That's answered my question, really.
Okay, we will look into that and report back to council. Thank you. So can we go back to the calendar, please? Can I have a proposer for the calendar with the amendments that we have made? Councillor Sims, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. But apart from part 2, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Are there any questions on anything in part 2? No, well, in that case, at 11:55, I'll close the meeting.